If how I'm doing it is wrong, then I don't want to be right. Hey there, today I have an unboxing video, and in this video I'm going to open up a set of auction wins that I won from the comic book selling platform HipComic from the seller Infinity Comics. This seems to be a recurring theme here, and when I was conducting the interview of collector auctions, which was a fantastic deep dive into adding value to your collection, but also we touched on Infinity Comics, and one of the things that we both realized was because we're trying to be transparent about how we collect in the hobby and what we're doing, that it could be perceived as maybe we're kind of doing the wrong thing by maybe oversharing a little bit, because it seems like a lot of people have caught on as far as using Infinity Comics for a certain way to either acquire keys and grails that are potentially overgraded, undervalued, overlooked, or maybe just didn't have the kind of attention and popularity as other platforms do, such as eBay. And in this unboxing that I'm going to go through, there's a number of books that I won from 2023 where I hadn't quite found my footing yet with Infinity Comics, but I did find several examples of some really nice books and significant keys that I hadn't been able to acquire elsewhere that I was able to get from Infinity Comics. So I want to open this up and show you which books that I won at auction. The other thing is I am interested in evaluating whether or not I should participate in the Walt Simonson upcoming Signature Series event with CGC. And there is a book in here that I have coveted, many people have coveted for a long time, and I feel like if I am going to participate, this book has to be included. It's really just kind of a no-brainer, and I wasn't sure if I had ever acquired this book over the last couple of years, and when I was doing some research on past auction wins, I did in fact win this book. So I'm excited to also look at that book in more detail, determine whether or not the condition has maybe some pressable defects, or even if it's just worth sending in as is. So this was really the catalyst for finding this specific box that was kind of in my backlog of unboxed shipments, and I wanted to prioritize this one to take a look at this book. As soon as you see it, you'll know which one, and you'll say, yeah, obviously that's the one that any of us would want to have Mr. Simonson signed. So let me get to the unboxing. A lot of books to go through. Really cool and exciting order. One of my bigger sets of auction wins from Infinity Comics. So let's get to it. All right, here it is. Pretty big box. I can barely get it on the screen, but it is a 5 pounds of comic book magic here sent from Infinity Comics back in the summer of 2023. A lot of great books in here. This is going to be a fun one. Let me go ahead and get this opened up. Okay, thank you Infinity Comics for packing these books really, really well. Spared no expense with the bubble wrap. The tape monster definitely got me on this one, but really appreciate the fact that they send out these books very quickly, very safely and securely. And let's take a look at the comics that I picked up. I won a total of 21 books, but this was around July of 2023. If you stay to the end, I'll show you the order summary of what my final bids were on these books. But let's take a look at the books. And the first one is Marvel Team Up number 103. This is the second full appearance of the Taskmaster. He has a cameo in Avengers and then a first full where he's on the cover. And then there's this book, Marvel Team Up 103 here. This one was listed in fine condition. If I remember, I'll try and let you know what the listed condition was. Certainly that'll be part of the order summary as we look at the grades. Next is Marvel Presents number 3. This was a fine, very fine copy. You could see a little bit of tearing on the staple here, but thought this was in a little better shape than advertised. And this is when the solo storyline of Guardians of the Galaxy begins here in the Marvel Presents title. Marvel 2-in-1, Marvel Team Up. I'm able to find some pretty good value with those sort of secondary titles. Next is Fantastic Four number 90. This was also listed as a fine, very fine, but Jack Kirby, Stan Lee, Silver Age Fantastic Four. This one I took a chance on. This is not a key. In fact, not one of the more memorable stories, kind of like a filler issue, if you will, of Fantastic Four. But for a while, I was targeting these types of books on heritage auctions and trying to get somewhere around like a 5 to 6.5 raw. And when I was bidding, I just figured, why not do the same on Infinity Comics and go ahead and target that? And this, again, this was kind of my evolved process with Infinity Comics, where I was looking at like minimum very fine and above, and then maybe making some exceptions depending on keys or if there are value in lower grades. And this was me just kind of bidding on a lot of books that I was interested in regardless of condition, and not completely regardless. The only real criteria I was using at this time is I was trying to avoid books that were listed that had moisture damage, rusty staples, or if I looked at the image and the book was just completely and utterly filthy, I would avoid them. But if even like a fine, very fine sort of copy, or somewhere around the 5 to 6.5, like I was doing with Heritage, if the book was more or less clean, didn't have a lot of color breaks, and avoided some of those defects that really can't be cleaned or corrected, like mold is another one, you just steer clear of that, then I took a shot and bid. Another Silver Age book that meets that criteria, Daredevil number 74, cover art by the great Marie Severin. This was also a fine, very fine copy, really, really nice mid-grade Silver Age book. Next is Daredevil number 67, also the same criteria. Another Marie Severin cover featuring Stiltman against Daredevil. Really cool perspective. Just awesome, great cover art there on Daredevil 67. This one was listed as a fine minus. Another Daredevil book, Daredevil 51, listed as a fine, very fine. This features cover art by Barry Windsor Smith, probably better known as Barry Smith at the time. Just a nice, presentable, strong copy here. I mean, for a fine minus, for a fine, very fine, I really just thought this was a very nice, presentable issue with vibrant colors, great centering, and yeah, absolutely fit my criteria for a book that I would bid on and try to win. More Silver Age, Captain Marvel number 3. Very, very striking Gene Colan cover here. Love the yellow, white, and green palette on this one. I do feel like it has doesn't look like a subscription crease, but there's definitely a fold down the middle. It doesn't seem to break color. This was listed as a very good fine copy. And although I can see some color breaks, I mean, for a Silver Age book like this to me is a lot better than the advertised condition. A book from 1968, I will take it. Next is another issue of Captain Marvel. This is Captain Marvel number 2. Also cover art by Gene Colan. Another book around a very good. This one looks to be in a little bit worse shape than issue 3. I'm seeing just some color breaks around the staple right there in the center of the book, here near the flames. But the sharpness of the edge gave me some hope. What I typically do is I'll look at the top edge, and if I start to see wrinkling and color breaks along the top and bottom, to me that's where you start to think about the drop off from mid-grade to low grade. And I think this could probably get into that 5.0 or 6.0. I'll have to take a look at the back of the book and see if there's anything there. But again, just at first glance, it does appear like these books were undergraded. Here's a really nice single-digit issue of Spectacular Spider-Man. This is Spectacular Spider-Man number 8, cover art by Paul Gulacy featuring Morbius. Now, this one was listed as a fine, very fine. I don't know about that. The spine looks to be okay. It's definitely miswrapped, and it is suffering from a stacking crease, so this could benefit from a clean and press. If this were a bigger key, I would also potentially invest in a spine roll fix, but not in the best shape. But I did think that this had some defects that could be improved if, after I look up the values and evaluate the additional investment, it was worth it to throw a bid on. Next is Swamp Thing, number 35, cover art by Stephen Bissett. This was listed as a VF minus, and I've always loved this cover, as collectible as it is part of the Alan Moore run. All right, so we're about halfway through. Next up is Incredible Hulk, number 116, cover art by Herb Trimpe. from 1969. I can definitely tell that the cover is a little dirty in some places, so it definitely could benefit from potentially dry cleaning and even a press. It does seem like there are, I mean, it's hard to tell because it's a white cover primarily, but there are color breaking ticks. But what I mean is that it's almost like there's paper breaking ticks along the spine, but really hard to pass up this awesome issue of Incredible Hulk from the Silver Age. Next up is another Incredible Hulk. This is Hulk 109, another great Herb Trimpe cover featuring Kazar and Zabu from the Savage Land. This one was listed as a VF minus. I'm not sure about that. There are some color breaking ticks, even some color loss here. Some dirt around the price box, but sharp edge on the top. So it has some positives, some negatives. Just kind of have to see how the grade ends up turning out there, but that could end up being around a 6.0 to a 7, somewhere around there, which is fine with me. Next is Avengers 120. This was listed in fine condition. I'm a sucker and collector of the 20-cent covers, so when I saw this, I wanted to focus it a little bit. But, you know, looking again at my process that has evolved, I don't know if I would have bid on a book like this listed in fine condition. I would be looking at VF or VF Plus and above if I were to take a chance, but really awesome Jim Starlin cover here featuring Zodiac. Just love all the action, all the characters here. Great colors, very presentable, just may not grade out in a condition that I would like. It is possible that maybe a press could help that one out. All right, the next one, this is a this is a big one. This is Amazing Spider-Man 194, the first appearance of Black Cat. This is the first Amazing Spider-Man 194 I've ever owned. And yes, this was sitting around in a box since July of 2023, coming up almost a year. So part of me feels embarrassed. Part of, you know, when I had said, maybe I'm doing this wrong, why on earth would anybody buy this book and let it sit around? My whole philosophy is about taking possession. It's about the acquisition. And then what I decide to do with the book, at this point, it was more of just accumulation of comics, whereas more recently, I have adjusted that to try to make more timely decisions, meaning let's get this order unpacked. Let's decide if we're going to try to improve it, get it graded, put it in a PC, try to see if I could sell it, move on from it, and so forth. So everything has sort of evolved, and I've learned a lot of lessons and tried different things. But man, I thought that this book was in absolutely tremendous shape. This was listed in fine condition. I paid a lot for this because I felt like this was better than a fine condition book. Looking at the spine, just I know it's through the bag, but just to give you kind of an example, the spine looks amazing, no pun intended, or pun intended, Amazing Spider-Man. I do see a color break here, but for a book that's in fine condition right there, I mean, I would expect to see a lot more damage to this book, and I adjusted my bid accordingly. I mean, I felt like at a worst case it was a VF. You've seen the barcode. It is a newsstand copy, so there will be some sort of mild premium assigned to it because people like to say, well, the newsstands were beat up or more well-read. That's fine. Doesn't matter to me. For the most part, I'm looking at it. The darker colors in the background, just more susceptible to picking up color breaks, and people want this book in a presentable condition, and I think this really fits the bill. So I'm excited to get this graded and figure out what I want to do with this. And this also has nothing to do with Walt Simonson. So this is not the book. If you're wondering, why is this one going to be sent in for a signature series? It's not. This ended up being part of the auction wins that just happened to be in the same shipment as the book in question. But man, I can't wait to assign a final grade to that one and figure out if I want to go ahead and get that one graded, which I probably will end up doing so because really that book in any grade has value. Okay, let's keep going here. We've got another Amazing Spider-Man 127, another 20-cent cover. This was listed as a VG copy, and if I remember right, I think I threw up kind of a minimum or medium bid on it. It's not really in the shape that I would like, even though it is a great 1973 issue. Very, very minor key for Amazing Spider-Man, the first appearance of the third Vulture. But you could see just a lot of color breaks. And, I would say this is more typical of a low to mid-grade copy, or maybe just a straight low-grade copy. But I do see the 20-cent covers, and I try to grab those as often as I can. Next is Strange Tales 178. Cover art by Jim Starlin. This is where there's ongoing stories featuring Adam Warlock that begins with this issue. First appearance of Magus, an evil version of Adam Warlock. There's been a facsimile of this book. This was listed as a VF minus, and I can definitely see some color breaks here. So this grade might be accurate for this book. Actually, there's several. There's probably about 8 different color breaking ticks here. So this has more color breaking ticks than the Amazing Spider-Man 194, but that was listed as a fine 6.0, and this is a VF minus as a 7.5. So that's where the grading at Affinity Comics is kind of all over the place, and you try to do the best you can by looking at those scans. Another book that I always love to try and get, Red Sonja #1. Picked this up. It was listed in fine, very fine condition. This is the first solo series featuring Red Sonja. Now we have Marvel 2-in-1, #9. Pretty much targeted this one as it is a single-digit issue number of Marvel 2-in-1. Cover art by Gil Kane. Great Thor and Thing action right on the cover. Fantastic Four villain Puppet Master. But yeah, not in the greatest condition here, mid-grade, which is really tough when you're looking at these Marvel 2-in-1s, Marvel team-ups, Marvel Presents, Marvel Tales, all of these secondary types of either tryout books, team-up books, reprint books. You really want those to be like 9.2 and above. So that's, again, where my plan of attack for some of these books at auction has changed over time. What hasn't changed over time is how awesome Adam Hughes is, and here we have Wonder Woman 159. Adam Hughes did a run of Wonder Woman covers. This was not advertised with a specific condition other than awesome. I don't know if awesome is an official condition, but I took a look at it. It looked to be like around a 9.0 copy or maybe a near mint minus. It definitely has a stack increase, but I thought that the book looked great otherwise. And anytime I see some of these issues from an Adam Hughes run, whether it's Wonder Woman or Catwoman, I've got to pick them up. Another one, Wonder Woman 150. This was a book that I would buy from Mile High Comics very often, so it was on my radar. This was a VF minus, and it definitely does have some corner rounding there, which is going to be tough. That is obviously nothing that can be pressed out. It does have a bit of a stack increase, but it's possible, yeah, this one has a rounded corner as well, that this maxes out somewhere around a 9 or a 9.2 if there's nothing else wrong with the book. But I still pick these up. They're very desirable and collectible. A lot of Adam Hughes fans out there for sure. And the last book will be that book that I talked about as kind of the linchpin for this whole submission, and me going back and trying to track it down and figure out, am I going to participate in the signature series submission? This may be the only book I submit, depending on the grade, or it could maybe be in a bunch of other additional Thor books. But when I think of Walt Simonson, I think of Thor. I know he's had a very illustrious career, but I think he is synonymous with Thor, and in particular this issue. And it is Thor 337, the first appearance of Beta Ray Bill. Probably one of the most recognizable covers of this era in a lot of people's top 10 or even top 5 list of just greatest covers of this time. And yes, as a bonus, it is a newsstand copy. This was advertised on Infinity Comics as a VF minus, and the more I took a look, just the better shape it looked to be in, and I just couldn't believe that this was a VF minus. I do see through the bag and board that there is a stack increase. You can kind of see it. It almost looks like there's a shift in color right here, but that is the stack increase that would need to be taken care of. And then there's a number of non-color breaking ticks and very hairline color breaking ticks. I want to say I'm counting maybe 2 or 3, a little bit of stress to the spine. So unfortunately, this is not going to be a 9.8 candidate. It will need a press, but for the most part, it's a very clean copy. There's a little bit of ink splash up at the top, and so that's tough. So now you're kind of getting into that 9, 8.5. Maybe the VF minus was accurate. But what I'm going to try and do is look up the signature series value of this book in the grade that I think it maybe maxes out as, and maybe this is an 8.5, 9.0 copy. And from the brief research that I did, it is still worthy, pun intended, to have Mr. Simonson take a look at this one and apply his awesome and recognizable signature to the book. And again, you get a little bit of a value bonus there with the newsstand copy, which is why I ended up targeting that specific issue of Thor 337. But yeah, just wow. One of, I would say, my more exciting shipments of auction wins from Infinity Comics. And while I was looking at the Thor 337, this Amazing Spider-Man 194 may end up being quite the gem, depending on the final grade for that one. So really fortunate to add these books to my collection. I want to show you what I ended up bidding on these books and compare it to kind of the condition that they were listed in. So you can see not only the final bid, but the additional costs involved, shipping, tax, and then comparing the overall investment in the book to the fair market value if I were to keep the books raw. And then if I were to send them in for grading, what kind of potential additional value could I add if I were to send them into CGC? So let's take a look at the order summary for these 21 books that I won at auction from Infinity Comics. All right, here is the order summary for the books that I won at auction back in July 27, 2023 from Infinity Comics. I was invoiced $551.59, and that is including $19.99 to ship these books to me, and then because I'm in California, a 9.5% tax on each of the books. So what I end up doing is I apply the tax to each book individually and then distribute the $20 shipping across the 21 books so that in column L, I can see my actual door-to-door cost to acquire the book. Now in the grade column, what I ended up doing is assigning the grade that Infinity Comics listed the book at. So not my final grade. I would say that in my experience, let's say 75% of the books typically are undergraded, and then the other books are either accurately graded or overgraded. So it's just kind of how I play the numbers and play the percentages. And I did my best with Wonder Woman 159. I just translated an awesome grade to a 9.0. So trying to stay realistic and conservative, and if I move to the right, you'll start to see some of these additional value columns pop in. The cover price fair market value of each book here is returned based on the grade of the book, as well as the CGC fair market value. And then if I compare my total cost to the cover price fair market value, you could see in total, even after tax and shipping and the final bid, if I were just to keep all of these books raw, I've added about $66 of value to my collection. It's not a lot when you're looking at the relative cost of all of these books combined, but my whole strategy is making sure that I'm bidding on books in general that have value. So in a worst case scenario, I'm able to acquire books where someday down the road, if I were to move on from them, that I was kind of at least, in a worst case, paying fair market value where they're retaining that fair market value. Now, the goal isn't to necessarily have every auction win be a break even or a wash. It's to have that potential. Now, if I were to send all of these books in for grading, there's no potential value here either, as after all of the submission fees and shipping to CGC back and forth, it would have been only a $48 value add. But again, my strategy is to make sure that I'm not buying books where ultimately I'm going to lose money. I want to buy these are not books that I'm going to read at this point. I've either already read them or I have a digital companion where if I did want to read a Silver Age Incredible Hulk, I could do that. This is really just zooming in on the collectability and potential value of the books and helping me make the decision as far as what do I want to do with them. Are they worth sending out for a clean and press or submission to CGC. Now, the books as they are now, they are what they are, but at least there is some comfort knowing that I am at least at a bare minimum at a break even situation. And that's kind of where I want to be. That to me, that's my floor, is can I just break even on these books in a worst case scenario? And so I've accomplished that. And I think that's a harder to do than people think, especially when you see a book like this and you get excited about ASM 194. What is that final bid so that you don't end up losing money? Well, if I were just to keep the book raw, the fair market value of that book is $198, rounding up for easy math, $200, both in a raw and a CGC 6.0, which is what I graded the book as here. And so as I plug in this grade, then that's where these two columns adjust. I paid a total of $223.78 to acquire the book, so I did overpay a little bit. I will say, just to maybe defend myself a little bit, I would have to go back and see what the value of this book was at the time, because comic books in general have slid in value over the past couple of years. So these values are current at the time of this recording and not the value at the time that I placed the bid. So it is possible that it was a little bit more valuable a year ago, but because I held on to the shipment for that long, I can only look at the current values. Now, do I believe that book is a 6.0? No. If I open it up and I see maybe the back cover is torn or just completely wrinkled and shredded or something that would bring it down from a very nice presentable copy, then this is not a 6.0, and this is ultimately why I ended up overbidding just slightly for it. Honestly, my final bid was $203.50. It was just the additional shipping and tax that kind of got me. And although I understand this and I try to factor that in when I'm setting up my bid ranges, you can kind of see it was a $200 book. I bid $200. I won it for $200. And that's kind of where it is now. Again, it's the potential of it. So I want to just play around with some of the grades a little bit here in a second. But let's look at some of the other values. I want to look at some of the bigger ranges here. Strange Tales 178, a $25.75 raw value loss in that grade. And then Fantastic Four 90, Daredevil 74, Daredevil 67. Those were all losses as well. So those would have to be either reassessed by me with hopefully a better grade or a potential clean and press bump on those. But there are a number that did end up returning some positive value. Wonder Woman 150 I got for $7. Cover price says that's roughly a $20 book, so a nice value add there. Even Wonder Woman 159, a $9 value add there. I'll come back to Thor in a second. Red Sonja number 1, $15 value add. Marvel Presents number 3, $14.56 value add there. So I think from a raw value perspective, I did pretty well. It would be as if I were to send all of these books off to CGC, where that would be a problem. I would need to really figure out which of these books were undergraded and then which of these undergraded books have that additional potential. So if you're looking at 21 books, maybe 10 of them are undergraded, or going back to my 75%, maybe it's closer to 15. And then there's going to be a subset of that 12 to 15 books, maybe half of them, 6 or 7, that will end up being worthy of a clean and press. Now, hopefully, I think Thor 337 does have some potential value for a grade bump there. I still feel like ASM 194 has more ceiling into that book, just because I did notice some things with Thor 337. But I ended up paying $51.32 for that book. It has a cover price raw fair market value of $69 for a $17.68 value add for the book raw. In a CGC 7.5, you can pick up that newsstand copy in a 7.5 for about $75, which is as great, as desirable as the book is. 7.5, not an ideal grade for that book. Now, I'm not going to change the grades to all of these. I don't think any of these really have the potential to be a 9.8 candidate. But typically what I can do with Infinity Comics is look to get about a grade or two bump if I were to send them off for cleaning and pressing, sending the right books off, not all of them. So I don't want to play with the grades on all of these, but just focusing in on the two specific keys, Thor 337 and Amazing Spider-Man 194. So if Thor 337 is moved to an 8.0, the CGC value actually drops, and that happens too, depending on the number of copies in the census and the last more recent sales and so forth. So that was not great. But how about an 8.5? Maybe there's some more recent sales. Again, not a huge jump, $85 there. 9.0, if there's some extreme miracle, that's where you start to get into the triple digits. There's $104 for that book in a 9.0. And then all of the numbers just looks great. It looks like, oh, a raw value add of about $48, $49, and then a CGC value add after shipping and the grading fees of $28. Then it makes me look like a genius. But that's not what the book was advertised as. It was advertised as a 7.5, so I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. But interesting kind of range, maybe like a $60 to $100 CGC graded book, depending on the final grade. And then if I were to also pay for Mr. Simonson's signature on it, I'd have to take a look at the values of that book and probably target an 8, 8.5, maybe a 9.0, but look at the averages of a very fine copy all the way up to a very fine near mint and just kind of see. I have a hunch without looking at all of the numbers that would probably be a break even, that you could be better off just spending a couple of $100 and buying that book already signed. But I'm going to look at the numbers and see just what makes sense. The last book I want to look at in terms of the potential is ASM 194. I don't believe that's a 6.0. There are a lot of these books in the census, so hopefully as I change these grades, we'll kind of see even in a 7.0, the CGC fair market value jumps to $355. So just that alone, moving it from a 6 to a 7, there's a lot of value add here. From the raw value perspective, an additional $56 and then $107 of value if I were to send this book in for grading. And then just some sort of wild scenario, maybe a 9.0 is possible with that book. And then we start to get into some bigger numbers here. $579 for that newsstand copy in a 9.0. And even if I move it back to an 8.5, roughly $450 there for that book. So although you're looking at these values and probably think, yeah, you are doing it wrong. You're buying books at fair market value. Like, what's the big deal? It's really, like I said, that to me is my floor. I know that many of these books can be cleaned up and pressed. I don't think I've ever picked up a book from Infinity Auctions and I've looked at it and go, this book has been pressed. I can see, the presser crease or something like that. All of these books literally appear to me as if they were lifted out of somebody's collection that Infinity Comics had acquired, and they quickly scanned the books, assessed them, put a conservative grade on it, and out they went. And I try to really be realistic with that floor and then go through each book myself, apply my own skills to screen the books and see if there's any additional potential there. And then through all of the math and the formulas that I've created over time, I can see if any additional investment would help the book. Otherwise, I'm happy to keep it raw, and I'm happy knowing that I didn't overpay for any of these books in the condition that I acquired them in. Let me know what you think about these auction wins. I have pretty much retired from bidding on Infinity Comics, so it's a lot of fun for me to go back and look at these orders from the past that I did prep for, study, create the math, and actually ultimately participate and bid on these books. I actually remember the thrill of watching the ASM 194 and the Thor 337 close and have me as that final high bidder. And so it is kind of nice to relive that a little bit. But feel free to leave me a comment about this strategy, how you think I did on these specific auction wins, and if these are the kind of books that you're targeting at auction. Thanks for watching. Happy collecting, and see you next time.